back to the Triple Threat Podcast. My name is William Ezel, and today we're going to be breaking down MVP award just got announced yesterday. We'll be getting to that one, and we'll be breaking down the 4 games that happened most recently in each series. So, Ishan, what do you want to take us off today? What game do you want to start with? Because we've got 4 very interesting ones to go with.
Yeah, let's actually start with the Nuggets and Suns because we can talk about the two main awards there. So first of all, if you haven't heard, Nikola Jokic won the MVP award, and I think that it was 100% deserved. It was justified. They were the 3 seed, and there's only been one occurrence where the MVP has been outside the 3 seed, and that was Westbrook 4 years ago in 2017. But if you saw what Jokic did as a center, it's really unparalleled. We haven't seen a center be able to score the ball, rebound, and be the focal point of a very good playmaking team really ever. 26 points, 11 rebounds, 8.3 assists, and then he shoots 57 from the field and 39 from 3. Just a hyper-efficient season and really one of the best offensive seasons we've ever seen by a big man. So I think that this award was perfect.
And
I can't really see Luka or Steph, even though they had better individual seasons, win it due to their lack of team success. And Embiid missed too many games. LeBron missed too many games. So I think Jokic, spot on.
yeah, you talk about great season for a position. He probably had the second best offensive season just behind Steph Curry of any player. And when you talk about value to a team, you're going to really look about how much he influences how many wins you have versus an average player. But what's his value to the team? And if you look at wins above replacement, Nikola Jokic is by far and ahead of anyone else. It's not even close. If you look at wins above replacement, Nikola Jokic is at 17. The next best is at 13, which is kind of crazy. That 4-win difference. The next time you go down to 4, you go all the way down to number 10. So he's so far ahead of everyone else in terms of wins above replacement that it's not even funny. The fact that they've lost their backcourt, mainly Jamal Murray for a lot of the season, the fact that he's been able to carry that workload and keep this team afloat as a top contender really is a testament to how great he is as a player. But the fact that they don't have that backcourt currently is really hurting them in the playoffs. And if you look about the MVP, you're going to try to look for a team that finishes in the top 4. I don't think the Nuggets are going to do that, but there's no other really contender for that MVP that's going to remain in the top 4. You look at no one on the Jazz deserves MVP. The Clippers, Kawhi Leonard misses too many games with load management. Joel's been hurt too much. Kevin Durant's been hurt too much. There's no other really. Giannis isn't going to make the top 4 either. There's no one in the top 4 that's more deserving. And if you look at just in strict value, Nikola Jokic is by far and away the most valuable player in the league this season.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the, I guess, standings, and I think Embiid did get second place, which does make sense because when he was healthy, when he was up, he looked like a different player. I wrote an article at the beginning of the season that said 5 reasons why Joel Embiid was overrated, and he proved me wrong for 4 out of the 5 basketball-related reasons. One of them was durability, which is fair, but I think that Embiid making second place totally made sense. Steph Curry got third place, which I get, and then Antetokounmpo 4th place. While the Bucks kind of flew under the radar and they weren't historically great like they have been years prior, I think Giannis still had a great individual season. Then 5th place was Chris Paul, which I fully agree with as well. Being able to take a team from a 9-10 seed to the 2 seed while being the kind of focal point at that age is insane. And his stats were not as sexy as Antetokounmpo or Embiid or Jokic, but he still had a hyper-efficient season, made an impact on both sides of the ball, and was that veteran leader that every young team needs to make a push in a tough Western Conference. So I would say that these five definitely stood out to me. I'd actually have Chris Paul over Giannis in my MVP rankings, and I have Chris Paul on my All NBA first team personally. But I think that this was not a season where there were too many other legitimately deserving candidates, and no one really got snubbed. So it was
Yeah,
all.
Chris Paul is someone who I wanted to talk about because he's someone that statistically you're not going to be able to see his value because he's been doing the same thing throughout his entire career. He's putting up the same type of stats, and you're not going to see the value he has because his value isn't defined by his individual performances. It's about the performance of his teammates and what he brings to a team. His leadership ability, his ability to inspire belief, and just really motivate players and mold these young players into ideal basketball players is something that you're not going to see on the stat sheet. But it's something that's so valuable to a team that it's hard to quantify his value to that Suns team. Because yes, they were undefeated in the bubble last year, but Chris Paul has really brought a new dimension to this team and has really raised the game of everyone individually. So he's someone that his value isn't defined in the stat sheet. So you're not going to see his name in the conversation, but it's really good to see him recognized in fifth place. And then the one other storyline with the MVP is that one guy got one first place vote from the fans. And that would be Derrick Rose.
Yep.
So what do you think about the fans having a vote this year? And do you think that it's a kind of dangerous precedent to give the fans a vote where they can give Derrick Rose, a player who everyone loves, the national treasure, but someone who's definitely not deserving of the award in the slightest?
You see, I'm not sure unless it's like a really, really tight MVP race, like Westbrook Harden a couple years back, or Giannis Harden even. That's where the fan vote comes more into play, but we kind of knew that Westbrook was going to be, Jokic was going to run away as the MVP. So I guess that fan vote was a little bit more meaningless. And while Derrick Rose obviously didn't have his best individual season, he was an integral part of a Knicks team that kind of surprised everyone. That was a true Cinderella. They were the hero. He was the hero to Trae Young's villain. So I think that giving the vote to D Rose, while I don't necessarily agree with it, I can understand why, but you can't really be pulling that when the race is tighter. So we'll have to see how much of an influence this fan vote has, because this could make or break an MVP race eventually.
Or in some years, you're going to have guys like Caruso getting an MVP vote. So kind of thinks that might mess up a legacy with bias from the fans. But the fans provide a very valuable asset that they need to be listened to. But sometimes they can get a little bit too carried away in some of the narratives. But that's kind of true of any MVP voter. So let's talk about the actual series itself, or the game itself, the Nuggets versus Suns. A tale of two halves, one might say. That's a kind of a theme that you're going to see in a lot of these games.
Yeah.
Very evenly matched going into the first half. Back and forth. Nuggets looked a little bit ahead, but the Suns really turned it on in the second half. Bridges was a very integral part of that turnaround, and just an overall lights-out shooting performance that really pulled the Suns ahead late, and especially in that third and fourth quarter, they just really took it to the Nuggets, and the Nuggets had no response with their lack of backcourt.
Yeah, the Nuggets were up 1 going into the half, and then third quarter, Phoenix outscores them by 10. Fourth quarter, Phoenix outscores them by 8. And yeah, 8. So I just think that we kind of mentioned this a little bit before, but that lack of backcourt, first of all, does really hampers her scoring ability and Denver's offensive ceiling, because Michael Porter Jr. did not have the most efficient game, and Jokic only scored 22. So when your next best scorer is when your next leading scorer is Aaron Gordon, then an inefficient MPJ, then Facundo Campazzo, then you start to see some problems there. So I think that Jamal Murray being gone, Will Barton, who can give you 10 to 14 points and pretty good defense, really hurts there, because Murray, we've seen what he can do. he can take over games with his offense, especially in the playoffs, like we saw in the bubble last year. So I think that it's that's really gonna hamper them, especially given how good Phoenix is on perimeter defense with Chris Paul, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, even guys like Cam Johnson. So Phoenix came in, shut down Denver's wings, and that really eliminated their offensive ceiling from being kind of high. And then on the other side of the ball, Phoenix's wings just were lights out. Mikal Bridges, 23 points. Jay Crowder, 14 points. Torrey Craig, 9 points. Cam Payne, 7 points. And they all shot decently well from three. And now you don't really have anybody that can guard all these very versatile, switchable wings. Because Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, and Austin Rivers are not defensively sound enough to neutralize Mikal Bridges, who's one of the most valuable role players in the league, or Jay Crowder, who's been an elite shooter for the last couple years, or Cam Johnson didn't shoot very well, but maybe next game we'll see an electric performance from him because we all know what value he brings from the 3-point line. So it really lies on the wings. And this team Phoenix kind of reminds me of Boston in a way where they have 3 to 4 elite switchable wings, and that's just hard to stop with a very injury depleted Nuggets team.
I mean, they really turned it on in the second half with shooting an effective field goal percentage of over 70% in the second half, and that's just really unheard of. I thought really changed the game is their ability to space the floor, because once they started knocking down those threes, they opened up so much in the paint and in the mid-range area that Denver had no answers to at all. That spacing really caused havoc in the fourth quarter where they were 12 of 14 from 2-point mid-range layups. Just they opened up so much that Denver really had no answers with their relatively small backcourt. Because, I mean, I want to give some credit to Campazzo because, I mean, he was giving it his all out there. He hustled. He hustled, but that size disadvantage that he has, it's going to be really hard for him to make up for it. I don't know how different this game would have been if they had both Barton and Jamal Murray, but definitely a big loss for them. And just Phoenix, if they can keep shooting like this, which is definitely unsustainable to shoot 70%, but they really turned it on and they really wreaked havoc in the mid-range area. So hats off to the Suns and Monty Williams. So let's talk about Monty real quick. Snubbed on Coach of the Year. What do you think about the decision to give Tom Thibodeau the Coach of the Year award?
Yeah, wait, before we get into that, I just wanted to say one more thing about the spacing comment because that's absolutely right. And that opened up the floor for DeAndre Ayton. And he's a bully. That man is a menace in the paint. Jokic cannot handle it. Had a very efficient 20 points, 10 rebounds. So I just wanted to give some credit to the big guy in the paint because we don't really talk about him. But yeah, Monty Williams, he was 100% deserving of Coach of the Year. You called it too before the season even started. And you, obviously being a Pelicans fan, know the impact that he has on winning basketball. But where's basketball's biggest market? New York City. The city that's called the Mecca of basketball. The city whose sucky franchise for the last 7 or so years finally turned it around and became the 4th seed. There was that narrative, plus, Tom Thibodeau reuniting with guys like Taj Gibson, D Rose, the whole run Chicago back in New York thing, all contributed to this great narrative where the biggest market now turned their hopes around. So I can kind of see why Monty got snubbed, but I personally don't agree with it. Because as good as Thibodeau was, we see from the playoffs how exponentially better Monty is because Thibodeau didn't even have an answer for Nate McMillan schemes, let alone Frank Vogel, LeBron, and AD. So, yeah, anything else you want to say about that?
I was gonna say I understand the narrative there, the fact that it's the Knicks, and I mean they had a great season. I don't want to take away from Tom Thibodeau, but the height at which the Suns have reached, and the fact that the coaching has been such an integral part of their success, and that this isn't just a team loaded like the Nets or like the Clippers who perform well, not as much the Clippers or the Nets, but teams that are really talented that won games because of their talent. This team won games because they're well coached, well disciplined, and a great team. And the aspect of them being a team and winning as a team is something that you can't really take away from them. So, Monty Williams, another year going under the radar. He's definitely climbing the ladder of the public perception and the court of public opinion, but
Sure.
he's going to need to win that award to really staple himself as a legitimate top. I mean, I think he's the top coach in the league right now. So
I think so too. And I feel like as good as Chris Paul is, as deserving as he is of the All NBA first team, the MVP, I feel like people think that it was just solely Chris Paul that turned the franchise around when it was Monty Williams' use of Chris Paul, his use of all that wing talent that really unlocked their full potential. Because Mikal Bridges was good last year, but he wasn't this good. Cam Johnson was good, he wasn't this good. Devin Booker elevated his game to a whole new level. There were aspects of Chris Paul this year that looked where he looked like his old self. So it's not just one player. You got to give credit to the coach too.
and Monty's been laying this groundwork for years. I mean, look what he did last season. Like we've seen the improvement that this roster's had, and that the talent and the performance on the court. So, Chris Paul was exceptional. Bridges was exceptional, but Monty has really been the driving force of this team. So, let's move on. You want to hit the other Western Conference series first?
Yeah, sure. Let's do that. Jazz Clippers. Unfortunately, I did not get to watch this game. I know you did, but I did see that Utah came back. Pandemic P happened again. And Donovan Mitchell exploded for 45 on a pretty good Clippers defense.
Yeah. So, just like the Suns game, well, even more so, this was a game that was pretty much dominated by the Clippers in the first half. They shot really, really well. They shot almost 80% from effective field goal in the second quarter. And then the Jazz couldn't do anything in the first quarter. The fact they're only down 7 after that first quarter, where they didn't make a single 2-point basket, were 5 of 20 from 3, only hit 5 threes in the entire. Like that was they only hit 5 threes. That was the only shots they made from the open field. So the fact that they were only down 7 after that was really impressive by them. But they were able to bounce back, and they really performed well, bringing that lead down from, I believe it was 13 at its highest. And they took the game, and they made it pretty convincing at the end. The Clippers gave it a good run for their money in the fourth quarter, but overall the Jazz roster really banded together. But what I noticed was an integral part of this team, and he played more minutes in the second half. It was Derek Favors versus Rudy Gobert. Favors looked both better for their offense and their defense. Offensively, he had over 20% offensive rebound percentage, grabbing 3 offensive rebounds in his limited time on the court. And then defensively, he was a lot more solid as a presence. It looked like they were playing a 2-3 zone because how much of a small lineup the Clippers run with their stretch system, especially when Zubac is off the court. Having Gobert on the court makes absolutely no sense when their biggest player is Marcus Morris, who's basically a stretch four at this point, shooting threes the majority of his shots. So when Gobert was lined up out there, he was either lined up incredibly far off the paint in a 2-3 zone or in a 3-2 zone, or he was lined up man-to-man against Gobert against Marcus Morris, where he was on the 3-point line. So it made no sense to have Gobert in this series, and this is why one of the reasons why Gobert is not a good playoff defender is because all these small lineups, an interior rim protector is really not needed. So Favors really helped their system, and then gobbling up a 21% offensive rebound percentage, twice that of both O'Neal and Gobert. I mean, really impressive stuff. Those putback opportunities really led to a lot of those open threes with inside-out basketball. I thought that having Favors in the game, they looked exponentially better. They put Gobert back in the fourth, and that's why I thought they kind of almost gave up the win there. So A couple other players I wanted to give credit to. Royce O'Neal had a great game. He's a solid role player that you're really not going to see a lot of attention to. And then the shooting of both Mitch and Clarkson. Mitchell, obviously, you're going to hear about him with his incredible point scoring, his volume, and his ability to operate in the paint. And his operating in the paint is a lot more effective than I thought when Favors was on the court. Just not having that presence of Gobert. So I hate on Gobert too much. He gets paid a lot of money, and I don't think he's worth that contract. So I think that's kind of why I'm too critical on him. But also, he gets Defensive Player of the Year every year, and when he's not a good playoff defender. So I hate on him a little bit too much, but I think definitely in this series, his value is not seen enough. Maybe if they went against the Nuggets or someone, but there's just not a lot of teams that have a lot of dominant forces in the paint, except for the Eastern Conference, because that's where you're going to see that with the Sixers and definitely the Bucks. So he's just not in the right conference for the playoffs. The Western Conference is a small division. It's a small conference, a lot of small basketball. I just don't think that he fits this series at all. So I expect to see Favors get played more. And then talking about the Clippers bench, I think they played exceptionally well. You look mainly guys you're going to look at in this series for the Clippers bench is going to be Luke Kennard. Kennard played exceptionally well. His shooting 4 of 6 from 3, 7 of 9 overall, just very efficient. There's a reason why he played. I think he played the entire fourth quarter. He's really solidified himself as that sixth man in that rotation. Rajon Rondo also played a lot. His playmaking was definitely felt, but you're going to expect some more point scoring out of Paul George and Kawhi Leonard. They didn't have their best games, and then Marcus Morris wasn't on his day shooting ability, 1 of 9 from 3. So I expect a bounce back from the Clippers in the next game. They can adjust offensively to really abuse Gobert if they're going to keep playing a small system. So I expect to see a much smaller lineup for them. And I expect the Clippers to definitely take the second game here. But hats off to the Jazz. They played exceptionally well, especially without Mike Conley. I mean, Mike Conley has been the heart and soul of this team, really a driving factor.
Playmaker, scorer, defender. He's been the do-it-all point guard without any weaknesses, which, as you know, as we've seen from guys like Kyle Lowry, thrives in the playoffs. So I'm excited to see this Jazz team with Mike Conley back for sure, because he will really, really cause some disruptions to the Clippers' defensive scheme.
And do we know a timetable for his return or no? Probably would have been a little bit important for us to research that. But anyways, definitely, I think that Ty Lue, if he wants to win the series, is going to have to put in some coaching work, because there's definitely a schematic advantage they can take advantage of when Gobert's on the court. Just play small and really force Gobert outside, take him out of the paint, open up that interior for the mid-range of
Hella in Atlanta.
Yeah, exactly. So they really just need to understand the lineup strengths and weaknesses and how they can take advantage of that team. But if the Jazz are running with Favors and if Snyder can really just counteract any proactive moves Ty Lue does, I think the Jazz can definitely win this series. I think it's a lot closer than I anticipated. But yeah, it's gonna take some. It's gonna be an interesting series to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess before we move on to the Eastern Conference, I do not see anything in the chat, but if you are watching and you want to see something and you want us to talk about something, or if you're interested, definitely drop a comment in the chat. We had Logan Paul drop something 2 days ago, and then we had, who was it yesterday?
It was African Bambaataa.
Yeah, he was a bit of a troll there, so try to keep it serious, but we'll answer anything.
We certainly will answer literally anything.
Let's move on to the least interesting game out of the 4 for sure. The game that ended after 2 quarters, the Nets and Bucks game 2 nights ago. So all the weaknesses that we kind of went over that the Bucks showed in game 1 were amplified to a whole nother degree in game 2. So first, Giannis's free throw shooting. He went 2 for 7 from the line. That's a big weakness that can definitely be exploited. It's Hakagiannis now.
The other Antetokounmpo made the same amount of free throws he did.
Who?
The other Antetokounmpo made the
yeah.
same amount of free throws.
And how many attempts?
2.
Yeah. So that's really going to hamper his production. That's a weakness that they'll definitely get after. And then, again, shots were not falling. They weren't shooting that much from 3, which kind of surprised me. Only shot 27 threes as opposed to their normal 36. And throughout the playoffs, the team is only shooting 30% from 3, which is one of the worst out of the playoff teams, even the ones that were eliminated. And this was a team that shot 38% during the regular season, one of the best all-time three-point shooting teams of the last couple of years have been Giannis and Budenholzer's Bucks. And then, once again, they did not listen to our advice at all. They let Brooklyn's role players go off. Just looking at the stat sheet, Blake Griffin had 7 points, 8 rebounds, and a poster. Joe Harris, 13 points, 3 per 7 from beyond the arc. Bruce Brown had 13. Mike James had 10. Reggie Perry had 8 points.
It's good to see Shamet back out there as well.
What did you say?
It's good to see Shamet playing as well, because I feel like he's been a little bit of a no factor this season, but playing 15 minutes, 3 from 5 from 3, so.
Yeah, Shamet, 9 points. So, literally, like, Kyrie only had 22. KD had 32. And so the fact that they were still able to drop basically like another 70 points from their role players is something that we really haven't seen from Brooklyn. So it's a strength that Steve Nash is unlocking, and it's something that Mike Budenholzer really has to emphasize. Because we've seen with Dallas, we've seen with Golden State, a heliocentric offense that's based around 1 to 2 players is not sustainable. It will not lead to wins. So the more you hug onto the role players and the more you let KD go for 45 but Mike James go for 5, the more beneficial it is for the rest of the team. And so I think in Harden's absence, now that he's out for Game 3, these Nets role players are making a massive impact. So more on the Bucks, Middleton, he had 17, but a very inefficient 17. And when you're the closer, when you're that defined second option, you cannot be inefficient in the playoffs against a team with a historically great offense that can kill you in transition. And then the other thing that I want to see after Game 1 was Milwaukee to utilize their size more, but they did not do that at all. And they had 12 less rebounds than their normal season average. So something that I just did not like to see. And then they just gave up after halftime, to be honest. And what did Brooklyn do? They capitalized on all of these flaws, all of these weaknesses, and put together an all-time great performance. So hats off to the Nets. Milwaukee, you got to fix these little things because the little things go a long way for sure.
And less so just dumping on what the Bucks have done and how boring the series has been. What can the Bucks do to turn the series around? Because I think that's something that's more interesting to talk about is what the Bucks can do to actually take a couple of games in this series and make it competitive.
So emphasize role player so have a more team-oriented defensive approach where everyone is switching, the role players are being treated as, solid starter level players, have more of an emphasis on them than just Kyrie and Durant. And then, part of it was luck too. Their shots have not been falling. They've gotten good looks, but I think part of it is just having their shots go in, because that will definitely boost the morale once they start to fall. And then a lot of it relies on the offensive scheme to open up the floor, give Middleton some better looks to improve that efficiency, to get Giannis in the paint more, and then also Giannis hitting those free throws too. So those are 4 to 5 points of emphasis that I would take a look at if I were the Bucks.
And they really got to cut down on their rotation. I know they played a lot of their scrubs towards the end of the game just because it got so out of hand. But I think they really got to solidify their rotation and utilize their defensive abilities because, I mean, Drew Holiday and Giannis are both first team NBA defenders on their best days.
Oh yeah,
So
Chris Middleton's a second team all defense player on his best day.
they
Brooke
just need to
Lopez.
understand how to use their matchups when James Harden's out because they've got a huge advantage right now.
hmm This is a very good team in terms of perimeter defense, but they're being destroyed on the perimeter. So just, I think they got really lazy after halftime. They gave up. Basically, they did the opposite of what Philly did in Game One against the Hawks. So we just saw a really sloppy performance, and I think that they're going to be back in Milwaukee. I think Budenholzer will have that fire in his soul now. Giannis should have that fire, and I think they should be able to pull at least one game in these next two in Milwaukee.
And I think it starts with uh, playing better perimeter defense. I think that whether that's playing a more zone centric defense, because you don't want Drew Holiday just matched up 1-on-1 against the best players because what's killing you is their spacing, their shooting. So just having your best perimeter guys always just guarding the 3-point shot, I think is going to be what's going to help take this series.
Yeah, for sure. So finally, we have the Hawks versus Shake Milton. And this was a very, very interesting game to watch. So I turn on the TV, watch the first 5 minutes. I'm like, okay, it's over. It is what it is. We blew game two. They had all that momentum. The Philly fans are going crazy. Let's just be prepared for game three in Atlanta. But second quarter, Kevin Herter, Danilo Gallinari led the team to a great comeback. Philly's bench was definitely showing some signs of weakness. Atlanta's bench definitely capitalized on that. Third quarter is a little bit of back and forth action. We went from down 2 to down 8, but we could definitely close something out in the fourth. The game was not over. And then Doc River was like, as well as Tyrese Maxey has been playing, I'm going to take a little bit of a gamble here. Throw in Shake Milton, 14 points in 14 minutes. He just started a 13-0 run in 2 minutes. And it was just some of the best basketball I've ever seen from a guy that is nothing more than a role player. So I think a couple of talking points: Philly's transition offense, using their length and mobility on defense to get takeaways, and then utilizing their fast-paced offense to get easy buckets from those takeaways. Shake Milton's run definitely emphasized that, getting a lot of easy pull-up threes, some transition dunks. And Embiid, man, he was taking Capella out to the perimeter, and he was dominating Capella there. And Capella, as good as he is a defender, he's not a perimeter defender. So they're definitely going to need to make some adjustments. Maybe take a look at Onyeka Okongwu a little bit on Embiid, even though that's pretty overwhelming for a rookie. But Capella did not have his best defensive game after Embiid torched him from the perimeter. Trey did not have his best offensive game, which led to no real rhythm on offense from any of the starters. Bogey was pretty inefficient, which was a shocker to me. And Philly really just came in. They remembered their identity as a lengthy, defensive-oriented, fast-paced team, and they just torched us, especially in the fourth quarter. But there's one player from Philly that kind of stood out like a sore thumb, and that was Ben Simmons. And I think, as good as he is, he makes some pretty cool passes. He rebounds. That's pretty cool, too. He's a great defender. You cannot be an offensive liability. I don't care how good you are on defense. You cannot be an offensive liability in the playoffs, especially when this is your team's best shot at competing for a title. So Simmons, just get him to the free throw line. He'll shoot 2 for 8 or whatever. And he's got to be able to adjust back to this offense, because all those LeBron comps that we saw towards the beginning of the season have just not paid off. So I want to see Simmons either make some improvements on offense, or Doc Rivers just give him a much smaller offensive role. Because guys like Shake Milton, Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, and obviously Embiid have produced tremendously on offense, and Simmons has really been the sore thumb there.
Yeah, I think Doc Rivers. I just wanted to go a different direction talking about that first quarter. Doc Rivers definitely noticed what happened in that fourth quarter, what the advantage was, transition basketball. Um, so the Sixers came out aggressive and they really tried to take it to the Hawks. I mean, they scored pretty much all of their first quarter points from the paint. Most of the shots were within 1 or 2 feet. Tobias Harris was really dominating in that area. What they were able to do is just capitalize off transition and really force turnovers out of the Hawks. And I think starting off that game so strongly, I think it was a 12-2 at one point, right?
It was 18-4 at one point.
So I think they really started the game off on a strong note, but the Hawks really battled back. I think it was a testament to their passing ability. They were able to set up, slow the game down, bring the tempo to them, which really surprising to me considering Embiid's injury. I thought the Hawks' key to winning the series was going to be pacing. Turns out it was the exact opposite. They need to slow the game down and kind of take their time. And then overall, I thought the Hawks just fourth quarter basketball. They've got to work on their just relaxing at the end because they shot fairly well for the entire game until the fourth quarter. Their effective field goal percentage in the fourth quarter was 35% compared to 80% in the second. So I don't know whether this is some sort of mentality thing or a defensive alignment thing from Philadelphia, but I feel like Doc is really showing a discrepancy between Nate McMillan and Doc Rivers in that coaching department because Doc's a top 3 coach in the league currently right now.
Oh, for sure.
And what I mentioned last game, Matisse Thybulle. He came in, he played, I think, 6 more minutes than he did in the first game, and I think that his ability to play really great defense, and not just on Trae Young, just stopping that quick passing game because what the Hawks do so well is they pass the ball and they get the ball open to shooters. Whether that's Trae Young to Bogey to Herter, what they do is they swing the ball quickly and find someone open on 3, and if you get Herter or Bogdanovich on an open 3, it's pretty much over for them. So what they were able to really, I think just having Thybulle in there is just really really important for them defensively. I know he doesn't bring too much offensively, but you've already got a really, really solid offense. Seth Curry he really was the X factor in that first half. Just
5 for 6 from 3.
Yeah, I mean, he was really benefiting from that inability to defend the interior. Hawks really tried to just stop anything at all costs, and that really led to open threes, dribble drive opportunities, because Curry was really thriving off that dribble drive opportunity. He wasn't being just a catch and shoot shooter. He was being a really dynamic player. So what do you think the Hawks going to have to do in Game 3 in Atlanta to take this series back?
Number one, I think not trying to be too desperate, to slow it down sometimes, to calm down, to not always make the flashy play, to not make always a sick pass or the great shot. I think that we'll definitely need to make some defensive adjustments for Embiid as well. Keep Capella in the paint more often, and with DeAndre Hunter, I believe, coming back, he'll be able to guard Embiid on the perimeter, which will be a massive, massive upgrade. I also think that Hunter will be beneficial as a floor spacer too, just adding another 3-point shooter that can work off of Trae. We'll need to see a better game from Bogey. We'll need to see a better game from Trae, for sure. And we will need to see a better game from John Collins too, because especially in the first half, he wasn't doing too much. So I think that Collins is a big X factor, and 8 points on 4 of 11 shooting is just really not going to cut it. So we all know what he can do on the perimeter and inside, so I'd like to see a little bit more of John Collins.
And,
so I think
one last thing.
Yeah.
What did you make of the Embiid Gallinari altercation?
Oh, yeah. Well, never been the biggest fan of Embiid at times, but at least it didn't escalate too much because I thought it would.
I think that it was a little bit of a misunderstanding. I think who was it that was helping Gallinari get back up? So someone was helping Gallinari get back up, and on his way up, they brushed shoulders. I think Embiid probably took that as not a incidental thing, but more of an intentional thing, and
Yeah,
came
Embiid
after
wants to
Gallinari.
this time, so I'm not too surprised.
So I think that it was a misunderstanding of intention, because I think it was completely incidental by Gallinari. I don't think he meant anything. I think he was just trying to get back up, and Embiid was kind of in his, because when you're getting back up, you go up vertically. When someone's pulling you up, you're not gonna like go sideways around a guy, and Joel just happened to be in the way. So I think it was just either way, going after that aggressively after him was
That was unnecessary.
unnecessary.
And also, I didn't love the officiating in the game. Like, I'm not being a salty Hawks fan. I just think that at times there were some missed calls, there were some over exaggerations, like Embiid slipping and them calling a foul on us. So I think that definitely will be addressed in Atlanta. And I think that the fans will make a big difference. I don't think I'll be able to go, but I definitely want to see if I can catch a game because I will be the difference maker. I will alter a series. I will go crazy.
Yeah,
But
you're gonna see him on TV. He's gonna be that one fan going crazy, ripping off his shirt, throwing it around. Yeah.
no, I'm not gonna rip off my shirt because I'm gonna have a Triple Threat podcast shirt. You ever think of merch?
Um.
We'll do that when we hit
Interesting.
2,000 subs. But that really concludes, I guess, the 4 playoff games. We've analyzed them, and we did not see anything in the chat, unfortunately. So I guess we'll end it there. But be sure to subscribe, click the bell, check out any of the content coming soon. We're gonna be recording almost daily, pretty much, besides a couple of days, and we'll be talking about the playoffs, the draft, some NFL news, looking over some grades and predictions for the next NFL season. So this is going to be an exciting summer of Triple Threat Podcast. So stay tuned. As always, I'm Ishan Cheth, joined by William Ezel, and that ends it. Peace.
Very nice.